Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rock and Roll Farming Podcast. And today, I'm very much looking forward to taking a long overdue trip down to Ross-on-Wye in Herefordshire to talk to the man, the myth, the legend, and my very good friend Ben Taylor Davies. Ben, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Very good, thanks. You?
I'm very well, thank you. We finally got there, Ben. I should have interviewed you a long time ago, but yeah, my sort of midlife crisis got in the way.
Yeah, and my workload.
Yeah, we're both spinning a lot of plates, aren't we?
Yeah.
I feel like with these kind of podcasts, when you're talking to people about their life, you inevitably sort of start at the beginning with kind of childhood and background. And I try to not do that if I can, but I feel like with you, as the listeners are going to find out through this podcast, this is kind of like a superhero origin story. So we've got to start at the beginning. So tell me about your family history at Townsend Farm, first of all.
Okay, so interesting. You've mentioned the word superhero. Crikey, that's put me on a bit of a pedestal. Um, the history of Townsend's quite interesting, actually. My parents were farming in Lippard in Worcester on some pretty nasty clay. And in 1973, the end of they sold Lippard and bought Townsend down in Ross on Wye because my father's dream was always to grow potatoes. Um, and that was a thing that was done. People bought farms, sold farms, and moved for better
Mm,
farms, and that sort of thing. I mean, it's almost unheard of to actually up sticks
yeah.
these days in farming and just to grow a different crop. Wouldn't know anybody or anything that's ever done that really
Mm.
in my lifetime. But so yes, they moved down to Ross on Wye. We're very lucky to have a ring fence farm, and it's rolling Herefordshire country hills with a river at the bottom, and yeah, quite an idyllic farm to be honest. We're very fortunate what he chose.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is a beautiful spot, isn't it? I think I've obviously been there a few times, and everybody who goes there is kind of yeah. I don't know. I guess it's sort of if you imagine maybe what a quintessential kind of English farm in the countryside looks like, and maybe picture your farm. It's kind of like
yeah,
that.
I think yeah, like I said, we're looking over rolling hills right the way over across to Wales and all of the. Well, I can't call them Brecon Beacons now, but you obviously from where you are you pronounce it better than me. But whatever they're now called, and the Black Mountains and Hay Bluff and all of that sort of thing is quite stunning on a lovely day. So yes, we bought this farm, and it's basically divided in two in terms of soil type. We've got sandy loam over sandstone, and then down on the river we've got obviously a great big alluvial silt deposits. So really nice grade one soils for growing my father's potatoes at the time.
Yeah. So they bought the farm in 1973. So I guess you were born not too long after that, mid
No,
70.
so no, so they moved Valentine's Day 74. I was born actually 76 in
Yeah.
July. And for those that were old enough to remember 76, my mum said she spent 4 months in a paddling pool just trying to keep cool
Yeah.
and yeah, and the drought. But it was also the year to make money out of potatoes if you had a bit of irrigation and things were rather quite rosy for 76.
Yeah. And then growing up, did therefore, I don't know, did your dad want you to be a farmer? Were you, because a lot of people in farming, and me included, I was kind of almost from the second I was born, I was kind of the heir apparent, the chosen one, and, not exactly pushed, but certainly encouraged to go in that direction. Were you the same?
No, no, it's quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Father thought it was quite a low. It was getting lonelier. Less people working on the farm, better efficiencies, all that. Like
Mm,
when he started on the farm, I think they had about eight staff. By the time I got to an age, there was only one.
yeah.
And he always said, there's far better ways to earn a living than mope about the price of potatoes. They were very volatile back in the day, and contracts weren't worth what they were written on that sort of thing. And yeah, he thought it was a lonely job and could affect mental health quite bad,
Mm,
um, as it did his. And B, there were yeah, he was desperate for everybody to go to university, get a decent education, and go off into the big wide world, which I tried to do.
Is it?
But
I've been to your place and I've seen the photos. You've got a and we'll get into what your farm looks like now in a bit. But you've got a lot of old photos of the farm, haven't you? And there's a lot of people working there. It's really obvious, isn't it? That kind of societal farming change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my big, I do lots of presentations on mental health. We'll probably touch on all that in time to come. But one of my biggest things in mental health is odd. We've got videos of this farm in the 1940s during the war. We've got lots and lots of photographs, as you said, and despite the fact we've got all these efficiencies, me and you, and you know, mobile phones, computers, and everything. When I look back, and all those guys used to stop for lunch and put out a rug and all
Mm,
sit down and have a ploughman's and all chat. I mean, the reason it's called a ploughman's lunch is exactly that, isn't it? You know, and whether you loathed or anything, you still had somebody to bounce ideas around
yeah.
and chat to and talk about all that sort of thing. And it's a very lonely place, is farming these days. And sadly, and we'll come to this, I'm sure, but salesmen seem to be the farmer's friend, and therefore it's a bit of a double-edged sword, really. You know, the people that you're coming up your drive to sell your stuff is also kind of your best friend as well to have a chat to, a cup of tea and a yarn about. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that that's something that's definitely a thing.
Yeah, my grandmother was a prolific diary keeper, so she kept diaries all through the sort of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And they're quite funny, really, because like a lot of these diaries, that they're sort of all farming, and then right at the end, occasionally there's a world event. There's one from sort of 1940, I want to say, and it's very detailed about farming. And then right at the end, it's something like Germany invaded the Rhinelands or
Yeah,
something. That's an afterthought. Anyway, but it was just I reread them periodically, usually on dark winter nights when I'm sort of missing my grandparents and feeling a bit melancholy. But it really, really obvious how often, especially my grandfather was off the farm. It's not the router off the table. He was at market. He was going to see people. He was, back into dealing with livestock. It just really obvious how much they were around people,
yeah,
much more so than certainly than I would be if I was just on the farm now.
yeah.
I think it's yeah, that loneliness aspect is quite important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and especially when you consider farmers as a whole, and our ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia profile, and natural selection of this. And it's often odd when I mention this to a lot of people about how farmers are actually naturally selected for ADHD and
Yeah,
dyspraxia, dyslexia. And you know, back in the day, a farmer would have six children, and the five academics would head off to the city to earn, and the more practical minded one of the bunch would stay at home. And he was and they were awesome. That was your superpower, and that was what you could turn ADHD into problem solving, and that was
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
But also, most are quite sociable people,
Mm,
that have this, and therefore is again a double-edged sword of people being removed, and then you have the need to speak and the need to chat and mull over your solutions to all the problems you're facing on the farm. So that also feeds into this um, possible problem, and the more we talk about these sort of things, I think the better people start to understand that you might have ADHD or dyslexia or a combination of the both, of which I have. Um, and talking openly about it and accepting and then understanding is a phenomenal superpower in itself, because it doesn't mean you're the different odd one out, and why can't I fit in with life and society, so much as actually I'm pretty awesome and I need to tap into this superpower, and that's why I am what I am. So acceptance is awesome.
yeah, absolutely. I spoke to Liz Haynes about this for the podcast and about that neurodiversity aspect, and she's obviously doing enough field about it. And yeah, the amount of people in farming who are neurodiverse it really is staggering. It's got to be that, hasn't it, evolved
Yeah,
over
absolutely.
several generations because
Yeah.
there's no other explanation, I don't think.
No, no,
But
no.
a lot of farmers are kind of in what is it? What's that phrase? Extroverted introverts, aren't they? So they're
Yeah.
kind of very. I would put myself in that bracket. Very happy on my own on the farm, but I also and sometimes I need my own space. Sometimes I can't cope with crowds. But then at the same time, I very quickly get lonely and be need to be around people again.
So the phrase I use about myself is I love people but hate crowds.
Yeah, I would probably put myself in that in
Yeah.
that bracket as well. Yeah.
Very comfortable among the people I know and that sort of thing. Put me in a crowd and I almost go silent. It's yeah.
Yeah, I can't believe that, but yeah.
Try to.
Um, University, what did you study?
Yeah. Like any good person thinking about agriculture, I went in and did geography at the University of Liverpool.
Yeah.
So studied geography and paleontology in actual fact, and I found it absolutely fascinating. The reason ended up doing geography at school, I was, shall I say, a difficult student, undiagnosed ADHD. Although my geography teacher, Mrs. Miles, who I'm still in touch with now, and I took on a tour of the farm the other day, Mrs.
Did you?
Miles,
That's
uh,
amazing.
absolutely
Really
brilliant.
nice.
Just kept dangling the carrots and just kept saying, well, you're probably not up to writing about the glacial epoch of Great Britain, but so it's hardly worth me setting you the task. And of course, when somebody does that and you're like, oh, I'll show you, and then
Yeah.
yeah, got an A level in geography, and she was like, well, I knew you would. It was just the way you're taught, sort of thing, and yeah, she that was just a revelation. So went off to University of Liverpool and did a degree in geography, paleontology, study of peat bogs mainly, which was amazing, finding the
I bet
different
it was.
pollen.
Yeah.
Yeah, finding taking these cores out of peat bogs and then finding Arctic tundra plants as well as cactus pollen and that sort of thing, so you could sort of track the climate of the UK and that sort of thing. And we did it across the world as well in California. It was pretty awesome.
Did you ever think
So,
about going into that for a career?
oh, yeah. So when I left university, I kind of came home every year and helped with potato harvest or potato planting and that sort of thing. So I kind of still assumed I might be
Mm.
wanted on the farm, anyway, I'll never forget my father throwing me a pile of Farmers Weekly and says, "Get a job." That was the kind of. So I actually applied for two jobs. One was as a researcher in Antarctica. In those days, you wrote a letter. I wrote a letter. I never heard a thing back. And the and
Yeah.
the and the other letter I wrote was for an agronomist. So yeah, got an interview and yeah, ended up.
How life could have been different if you'd got that
Yeah, yeah,
reply.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, it could have been down with the penguins
Yeah.
and doing all that, but no. That was about as far as I pursued a geography career.
Yeah. Okay. So, agronomy, I guess, is a fairly natural step for someone who's grown up on a arable farm.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was more about trying to find a job in agriculture that in my head it was perhaps one day I could bring it home as a skill. When my father either popped his clogs or retired, probably one of the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just, and I also thought it was a way of learning about farming and farming techniques that by going from farm to farm to farm, just going and working on another farm, you just learn one other farm's techniques. Whereas moving around, you can start picking up lots of different ideas. And I still do it to this day.
Mm.
I don't ever tell anybody, but I'm always watching, always learning, always seeing what people are doing and how might I be able to adapt that on my own farm, sort of thing. It's pretty cool. So yeah, agronomy was came about.
Yeah. But eventually you started to get disillusioned with it.
Yeah, it was sleep eat repeat a little bit. I was mainly cereals. It was chasing the Red Queen as the wonderful book
As the
was
book
written.
goes, yeah.
Yeah, and applying more and more and more for less and less and less all the time because biology always trumps chemistry. I didn't know this at the time, but I always thought there was always going to be this new magical chemical coming out to
Mm.
control things. And yeah, got a bit exhausting. I was obviously still undiagnosed with ADHD, so struggled in a lot of the meetings because often agronomists aren't farmers. So not in on the spectrum that I was. So every time you had a meeting, and their 2 + 2 = 4, and their two plus two to me equaled about 37. And I was always put down as being difficult and awkward and non-conforming and all that. And perhaps that was, but only because I didn't understand how they came up with four by adding what they were doing together. So it became a bit of a problem all round in the end. And And then it all hit home when my boy had his accident and life was turned upside down. And yeah, and time to actually probably have a well, that was when I had my mental breakdown. So I had to put things right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So let's go. Well, let's go there then. So at that time, just though, when did you meet Helen? Was that?
Oh crikey, met Helen when I was just past my driving test.
Oh, right. Okay. Really young.
We've been madly in love, as you could imagine, since so, yeah, for an awful long time now. I mean, over 30 years.
How did you meet?
Through a chap that used to work on the farm that moved away to another village not that far away, and he had a barbecue the one day and invited me across, and she was doing a bit of babysitting for his children at the time, so she was there. And met there, and I actually told her there and then. She was 14, I was 17. I said, I think we'll get married one day.
That's lovely. Okay, yeah, and anyone who's met Helen as well. I mean, she is what's that phrase? Behind every good man, there's an even better woman, or something like that.
Oh,
Her energy is incredible, isn't it? I mean, you are famously energetic, but Helen is at least your equal, isn't she?
oh, I'm more. I'm
Yeah,
more relentless.
yeah,
But very opposites as well. I mean, I do things off, I drop bombs, so to speak, and create this masterpiece and everything, and I'm thrilled to bits with it for at least 3 or 4 hours, and then I just get bored and got to move on. And
me too.
Helen loves the routine of the day. Going and
Yeah.
collecting the eggs and stocking the shop. And when I built the chicken tractor, for instance, the first day I woke up and went out there, collected the eggs, and I was like, this has all worked, and it's fantastic, and isn't it great? And then I woke up the following morning and I thought, I'm not again. Whereas Helen loves her sort of routine of
Yeah.
that. So, yeah, like you say, for everything I do, if it wasn't for Helen, it would just be explosions landing and pretty much left to rot.
Yeah, I think when my wife, when Sarah listens to this, she's going to be nodding knowingly because
Yeah,
it's a bit the same with us. I
yeah.
very quickly get bored, and she's the one who kind of has to put it all into process. But
Yeah, call it the dustpan and brush. Just sweeping up behind, isn't it? Just putting everything in
yeah,
all,
yeah,
as we're charging over the top.
yeah. I think yeah, it's common, isn't it? But yeah. All right. You mentioned Job and the accident he had
Yeah, so
last
we,
summer.
we we had we had three wonderful kids, and in 2012, life was really good. Life was really good. I had no complaints, and really and truthfully living the dream. And then we just, and I'm not going to go into it in massive depth because we could talk about this for hours and hours and
Yeah.
hours. But essentially, Helen pulled into a field, and Job was in a car seat in the back of the pickup, and she was just chucking some jumps into the back of the pickup to take to a local show. In actual fact, and um, he actually had two of these Houdini clips holding him in as well. So he was a master of the arts. Anyway, next thing is she looks up and he'd waddled literally about 50 meters, age 16 months old, and a mare was there and lashed out straight and kicked him on the side of the head. Um, and yeah, the power was so strong it smashed his skull on this side and actually came out the other side as well. So it was horrific. I remember the screams as she scraped him up. And one thing I've always thought about ambulances. Okay, this is my brain. Okay, and you'd never call an ambulance, would you? Because you've got to wait for them to come to you to go back to the hospital. So I've always thought, isn't it better for you to go to the hospital? Because that's surely much less time than anyway. That's how I scooped him up, rushed him in the hospital. Claxons all went in Ross Cottage Hospital, airlifted to Birmingham Children's Hospital, entered there with one of the worst brain injuries they'd ever seen in a child, and just horrific. He was in intensive care for weeks on end, and I can tell you now, a second in intensive care is about 2 hours. It's the slowest of times.
Mm.
And he was given 5% chance of survival. It was pretty horrific. Me and Helen stuck together pretty strong in all that. And people said, "How do you cope?" I mean, you just do.
Yeah.
You really do. And and Joe obviously suffered 65% brain damage but survived. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. And took us on a right roller coaster. Helen was, of course, calm and collected, sat by his bedside doing all the things you can imagine. I was just pacing. I knew how many steps from one end of the thing to the other and all that sort of thing. And just, yeah. And cut a massive long story short, he sort of came back online. They rebooted his brain, so to speak. It was quite amazing what they did and how they did it. And when we sort of left hospital, my life collapsed around me because we'd kind of become institutionalized in that hospital. Um, you don't realize how you rely on something until you don't have it anymore.
How long was he in there for?
We were in there till we were in there from basically 4.5 months.
Oh, yeah, okay, long
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. And it doesn't sound that long now.
Mm,
But I can't describe how that felt like probably 4.5 years of my life, really.
mm,
But it really, yeah. So he came out and then I got the brain damage, so to speak. I always say, that damaged my brain terribly. I couldn't cope with a lot of things. I prayed and prayed and prayed to anything that would listen about survival of my son. And I was in a job that killed things for a living, and I really struggled with that. Every
mm,
pesticide I was using, I was indiscriminately killing stuff, and somebody had answered my prayers, and that got me really thinking, and really sort of in my head, a real problem, and um, and I really struggled, and I'll say openly, I really struggled with acceptance of a disabled child. Really, really struggled. Didn't want one. That wasn't in the plan.
mm.
It it was. I could only see the bad for what it was. And I feel terribly guilty even now thinking it was all bad because in actual fact he's the most awesome kid in the world. So and everything we've learned about everything is just been phenomenal. But yeah, I struggled massively. So I was in a job now that I was killing stuff. I had all the mental breakdown of the Job acceptance. I lost all the passion for anything. I didn't really want to ever leave the house because I thought I needed to protect family. And then in the end, Helen just said, we're going to be all right. We'll take it one step at a time, and we are where we are. But you need to really go and find some solutions to your problems. And she said, you've always thought about doing a Nuffield, and you've always mentioned it. Well, it's probably high time you went and spent a bit of time on your own and
Mm.
go and do a bit of soul searching. So I applied for Nuffield. I didn't want it, and I got it.
Always the way.
Yeah, and Helen dropped me off at Heathrow Airport. I'll never forget, and it was terrible. I didn't speak to her the whole journey. Didn't speak to her when I got out, and I got on an airplane and I flew to North Dakota. Um, and Remember getting and sitting in this car that I'd rented for 6 weeks in North Dakota, and I thought, right, we've got two choices here. You mope round America for the whole of the 6 weeks, wishing you were at home, or you try and find some passion back for your life. And fortunately, one of the first people I bumped into purely by mistake, this is before he'd written a book, became famous, but Gabe Brown was one of the first people I bumped into at Bismarck Farmers Market. And yeah, was the start really. And I don't apportion it to Gabe because I met so many other amazing people that all did this opposite farming, as I called it.
Mm.
Just did the opposite of everything I was doing, including smile, including making money, including all the things that I now do myself. But my goodness, it was one of those things. I mean, I just yeah, got tears rolling down my face now. I mean, it was a hard time. It was a hard time.
Just to briefly go back to when Joe was in hospital, you talked to a nurse, didn't you, who told you that he'd make it? Just tell me about that again.
Oh wow, yeah, okay. Um, yeah, we didn't sleep a lot, as you can imagine. It was very hard. Helen stayed up in the Ronald McDonald House, which was built in the corner for anybody that slates McDonald's for everything they might be and everything they are. I tell you what, if you ever need to stay near a hospital with children, the Ronald McDonald House for Children is just the most humbling thing
Yeah.
to ever see. And I used to go drive up and down, take the children to school and all that sort of thing, try to have a little ounce of normality. And then always knew that the phone might ring and get up here a bit quick because he won't make it. We had a couple of those moments, sort of thing. So yeah. I mean, how do you call that normal? Anyway, the one day, I'll never forget, he was having a good day. He had good days and bads, and he was stable and on all the monitors. And I said, well, why don't we just pop and go and grab some lunch? And oh, I think of shivers down my spine already. And we didn't leave him very much, you can imagine. So
Mm.
we walked halfway down the ward, and this little and I can only describe her as like a matron. Like she was all in a white coat, and most of them were in blues in that time. And she came out to us and she said, "Job will be all right, you know." She said, "I've worked in this hospital for 55 years, and all the parents that put the massive effort into their children always do so much better than the parents that are unable to be with their kids, and he will do exceptionally well." And and me and Helen were like, "Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much. We're doing what we can." And she was just one of those things that just lifted the spirits, kind of thing. And it was amazing. So we went off for lunch and just chatted about this lady and said, you know, goodness me, couldn't have come at a better time and all that sort of thing. And just that something to hold on to. You know, just keep going. Let's just keep
Mm.
going. And we got back into the hospital and up onto the ward and went to the reception. And I said, I, the little lady that came and spoke to us earlier as we leaving, can I have a word? Because I'm quite interested in what she had to say. And they said, oh yeah, no problem. Who was it? And I said, well, I don't know her name. And I described her. And she said, well, there's nobody over the age of 36 working here today. And I said, no, no, bold as brass. And then it all went a bit quiet. And she said, it's happened to you, has it? And I said, what do you mean it's happened to you? And she said, this happens from time to time. There's a guardian angel walks these wards and often gives people encouragement. And yeah, and we had it when we needed it. And yeah, and I'm welling up now, as you can probably
Yeah,
tell,
me
because
too.
it was it
Yeah.
was it was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. So, you know, for everything you believe in and don't believe in and stuff, there really is so much more in life and the world as far as I'm concerned. And these sort of experiences just open you up your mind so much more to accept and you don't need to understand at times. You know, don't try and unpick everything and just take things as they really are. So it was amazing. Thanks for taking me back on that journey. I'm
I'm sorry.
absolutely
I'm sorry. It's made me cry as well. But you've told me this story before, but I don't want to hear it again. I wasn't expecting to be so emotional, but yeah.
yeah.
I suppose it
So
is, and that's partly because I mean, I've met Joe now, and he is, as he's just the best. He's always smiling and just for listeners who might be beside themselves and crying as well. Just reassure us. Tell us about what Job's like now.
Job now is just the most awesome of children. I guess he's the child that you almost always want because the easiest way to describe Job is Christmas will always be extremely special. I think I could almost leave it there. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
In terms of my teenage daughters are beautiful, and it's hi dad, or grunt or something else. Home. You know, Job is beside himself when I come home from a trip away or that sort of thing, and dad is home, and it's really cool. And he also loves all the simple things in life. The most amazing, you know, you can be walking across a farmyard and he'll stop and pick up a stone because he walks. Generally, you have to hold his hand or he takes a wheelchair at times, but he can walk. Certainly aided by a hand, but he'll stop and he'll pick up a stone or a stick and he'll say, "Isn't this the most beautiful stick?" And you stand there and have these conversations about sticks and that sort of thing. And then he was like, "Can we go down to the river and throw stones?" And he just loves skimming and throwing stones and just all those things. that should be the big, the little things for him are the big things, and therefore it is just wonderful to have that energy and enthusiasm and excitement. And I've, as you know, I've got season tickets at Liverpool at Anfield, and I took him there a few years ago, and he really struggled with the
Mm.
crowd, too much sensory. But I persevered and persevered, and now I take him more and more often now. And I've actually moved my season tickets for next year to make it easier for him to get in and into the seat, because he absolutely besotted with Liverpool and the fans and the singing and the chanting and everything. And and so yeah, he is just the most brilliant of children. And so are my two girls, who had to grow up rather quite quickly,
Hmm.
and became the role of second and third mum sort of thing as well. And we really are a massive family effort and a big family unit, which is another awesome thing. I'm very proud of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, I've met your family.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure you will. All right, let's go back to North Dakota. Had you at that time, were you? I don't, oh, well, I'll ask you. Regenerative farming. You are known as Regen Ben.
yeah.
Regenerative farming. Some people like that phrase. Some people don't. I mean,
Yeah.
was that something you'd heard of at the time? Do you?
No,
Were you
it wasn't really called regen farming then. I mean, just for those that get triggered by regen, okay, it's not meant to upset people. The whole idea is, rather than sustain what we have, which is often pretty poor soils and pretty poor environment, pretty poor income, pretty poor yields, pretty poor communities, we're
yeah.
just trying to regenerate them all. It's not as a you are this and you are not. We're just actually trying to make a better living and leave, regenerate our soils. I want to leave my children something that they can actually farm.
Yeah.
If it's all going down the road or down the drain, so to speak, it's your asset. It's disappearing. So, for those that just wonder, it is that. But no, you asked, had I heard of it? No, that's why I called it opposite farming at the time, because it
Mm.
was, I kept asking yield. He kept telling, everybody I spoke to in America, and then the rest of the world, I kept asking yields, and they just kept talking soil. And I was like, no, no, no. And in the end, it was like, right, there's something about this soil stuff, because I really was subterranean impaired. I never really. The soil was a medium in which you stuck things in and they grew, and then you just chucked everything at it, and up it came. And all of a sudden it was no, no, this is a living, breathing, organism, of which is so complex and so interesting and so amazing. If you look after your pennies, then the pounds look after themselves. Look after your soul, and everything else sort of falls into place. And this was the message I kept getting over and over and over again. And sometimes I wonder, because I was doing my Nuffield on blackgrass, on weeds and weed killers, and I expected to be told about, all these new chemicals being developed, and of course soon found out there were none. And the answer to a lot of these things was looking and listening about soil, and understanding, decent rotations again, and almost go back 300 years and learn what they did then.
So there wasn't actually a eureka moment then. It was a gradual
I,
thing.
I think I think the eureka moment came eventually for me in Australia, when all of a sudden I realised that blackgrass was it was all about the origin of species, essentially, and how whatever you did to blackgrass, it would just adapt to the
Mm.
environment you gave it. So if you went, we all used to be early drilling, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, go late drilling, and that's your problem solved. Well, it's only because blackgrass had learned to grow early. So when you went late, it just took a few years, and all of a sudden it all came up late. Go plant a spring crop. Well, nobody was planting spring crops, and somebody went one day and planted a spring crop, no blackgrass. You give it a few more years, and the blackgrass will come in the
Will
spring as
develop.
much as it comes in the autumn. So yeah, it was, Dr. Stephen Powell's that sort of suggested that alongside when I was in China, and they showed me hand roguing resistance, and that so yeah, see your eye go up there and
Yeah.
think, what are you talking about? So that was exactly so the night before I was in China in Shandong, no, lower than Shandong, but anyway, and they said, would you like to see hand rolling resistance? And obviously, Chinese to English and back again. And I was in the sticks of China. I kept saying, no, 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 no. You've misunderstood. And
Yeah.
they said, yeah, we perfectly understand what you're saying. We've got hand rolling. Anyway, this went on for a while. And in the end, I was like, you better take me because I don't think you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, walked into this paddy field and they said, okay, in here we have rice, obviously, and we have barnyard grass. Can you tell me the difference between the two? And I said, well, no, I don't really know. And they said, well,
Mm.
over the centuries of pulling barnyard grass, the very barnyard grass that looked like the rice plant was left because we didn't understand whether it was rice or barnyard.
Yeah. Okay.
So you kept taking out and
Yeah.
selecting, therefore, for the barnyard grass that basically adopted to look exactly the same as rice. And only when it heads now can they tell that there's a weed. So you don't know
Wow.
whether you got a field of rice or a field of weed. And it was just amazing. And you think, yeah, this adaptation, this adoption, it's all and talking about Darwin, and the finches and everything that happened in the Galapagos, really amazing. And that was a small amount of finches over a very long time. When you consider our weed population, just spin on its head, and it's a
Mm.
massive population on a short time. The calculation's still the same, and it mutates and adapts really quite amazingly fast. So that was my eureka moment to understand that actually that you just can't keep fighting it like this sort of thing. You've got to kind of work with it. And that was a fair eureka moment.
So when did you I presume as you were doing all this and as you were learning all this, you thought, I'm getting out of agronomy. Is that
No, not exactly. I just thought I've got to change the way I do agronomy.
okay?
It's not a battle. If biology always trumps chemistry, then in actual fact, we've got to look at biology far more. And some wise people told me some wise things. And one was you always fight the same like with like.
Mm.
So if you've got physical compaction caused by tractor wheels, then use a physical machine to remove it. If you've got chemical problems, then fight it with chemistry. But if you've got biological problems, use biology to overcome it. That was rather quite a useful part of my Nuffield too. So this is when I started coming back and starting understanding and reading and watching and listening to podcasts and more reading. And I turned into a rather quite an avid reader, as I'm sure you're aware. And yeah, and just learning and learning and learning, and every book I picked up, and often from the late 19th century, that sort of thing, on how farming was and what they did, not necessarily all the science behind it and the understanding, but my goodness, it all starting to make sense of all of that sort of thing. So
And
that's when things.
and as you were doing that, I guess your mental health from where you were when you started in the field was on an upward curve.
It was on a massive upward curve until um, we realised that Job was on a different trajectory in his schooling because, of course, his accident was 16 months old, at
Mm.
20 months old. So he actually went to nursery school. They did a fantastic job with him at nursery school, and he went off to primary school. But I think it was after the first or second year they realised that actually Job needs some real special help.
Hmm.
And we also realised that Job was covered by what do you call it? Public liability insurance. It was our horse on our farm, and therefore you had up to 7 years to make a claim. I think it was at the time, and he was going to need some quite serious adaptive livings to make his life as comfortable and care and who knows what in the future. So that's when we essentially sued ourselves, or Job sued us. It's rather quite complicated how it comes about, and it's only normally farms that this ever happens. And we were covered for £10 million, and as most farms are on their
Mm.
public liability, and the bill came in at 22.5 million. And when you get sued for 22.5 million, you're only 10 million. Yeah, you can do the sums. So we got a 12.5 million pound bill that we were facing. And you can imagine banks get a bit jittery when yeah.
Yeah.
So my mental health wasn't that great again then, just as it was getting better.
Mm,
The bank really didn't want to lend us any money at all. Certainly no more than what we got. And in an ideal world, we started coming under quite a lot of pressure there. And Yeah, and we were in the High Court quite a lot, trying to determine what we could do and how we could do this thing for Job, and argue the case that if we sold the whole of the farm to pay Job, A, after tax and things, it wouldn't even make the 12 million,
yeah.
and B, it's the very thing he loves, being out on the farm, and it wasn't in his interest. So, oh, it was a torrid time, a torrid time, and but essentially, all of a sudden, you got a farm for free. One day. So I reached out to everybody I spoke to, and they were absolutely amazing, amazing. All the people I'd met all around the world, and that's where, apart from the things like planting hedges and all these things we've been doing, since the 90s, and taking a bit more care of the soil and doing that, all of a sudden it was a big leap. This was the cliff edge. Off we go, and thankfully I've done all this reading and all that sort of thing as well, and it all started to make a lot more sense. And we turned a profit in the first year. And now profit wasn't something word we'd use an awful lot
No.
on the farm. And wow, how exciting. And yeah, and profit, funny enough, helps your mental health. And yeah, it kind of put everything back on the even keel. The High Court eventually agreed that as long as we gave Job some buildings and barns and left things in our wills to him and that sort of thing, that they could make the £10 million work and for him. It sounds like a lot of money, but you can imagine how much carers might cost in 30, 40, 50 years' time, because his life expectancy is 78, and he's 14. So yeah, that's a
Yeah.
lot of care. He doesn't need any care at the moment. He has a buddy that comes in, who he absolutely loves and that sort of thing. And he goes to my mum's for a bit of respite, and other than that, my girls and us all muck in. And yeah, he has the ultimate life. He gets food, he gets changed. He's got his own bedroom now that's just Liverpool everywhere, and yeah, living the best life. So yeah,
Yeah.
good.
I was you and I were I was on a I don't know if you remember this, but I was on a meeting with you when we were both Oxford Farm and Commerce directors, and you got the text about the High Court judgment, and you were had a glass of champagne. It was a
I
lovely
did.
moment for us
I
all.
did. Yeah, yeah. Yes. I mean, my mum. I remember when he was in hospital, and she said, what do you say as a mum, to a son
Yeah.
that's, in that. But she did say at one stage, you only ever dealt the crosses you can bear. And at the time, I listened to what she said. I didn't understand it. Didn't made no meaning of it. But in actual
Mm.
fact, looking back, people are only actually ever dealt what they can cope with. And often I look back now and think, we did pretty good out of all this. We're coming out the other side now. We're all smiling, happy, very profitable farm, very, very profitable business. What a wonderful family. Everything, we're on that trajectory to the sky at the moment. And wow, perhaps it does take something like that to make that happen.
Mm. Awesome to hear. All right. You have a phrase that's obviously a well-known phrase, certainly in British farming circles, that kind of get off my land. Well, you flip that and say get on my land.
Yeah.
And we talked a bit about loneliness and how that had changed over the generations in terms of having people on the farm. But for anyone who's been to your place, there's always people. There's people around. So tell me a bit about how you started with that, how you started diversifying the business and getting more people on the farm.
Well, trying to make money out of nothing was the was a start, and
Yeah.
we again, as you know, we were in and we've spoken about it. This beautiful Wye Valley. How do we make money out of the Wye Valley? And Helen said, or one of the children said, why don't you do a paid walking tour of the farm, listening to the birds or something. And I said, yeah, that's fantastic, but I don't know any birds or their bird songs, or I can tell a blackbird and a wren, and that's about it.
You can cheat
Uh,
now because you can use the app, can't you? The Merlin
Merlin's
bird app
fantastic.
that everybody loves. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I got thinking about a time we were in Australia. Me and my wife went for a meal in Uluru in the desert, and it was called Sounds of the Silence. And it was you sat there in the silence listening to any desert sounds, a rattlesnake or something like that. And I thought, why don't I start Sounds of the Silence walk at Townsend, where people arrive and the rules are you come in silence and you go for a walk in silence and you appreciate the bird song, and then you leave in silence, or I leave in silence, and you're left to leave. And oh my goodness, you should have seen how bugged we got. It became a bit of a cult. It was during the staycation year.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
so people were looking to do something different, and kids would come and try not to laugh and all that as they're going round, and that's as they tripped over a stone that taking them round. But we made quite a lot of money, quite a
Mm.
lot of money. And what was really interesting, and we got some great feedback on Google reviews, and I should really start them again because they were culty, but I'm just not here enough. But it's one of those things I really want to start again because it literally was. And I think what we do as farmers terribly is understand how the general public would love to do what we call a chore: milk a cow, lay a hedge,
Yeah.
fruit, all those sort of things. Anyway, and they're chargeable. Anyway, the only feedback we got was any chance of a cup of coffee at the end of at the end. It's 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. So I started thinking a little farm shop, that sort of thing, and a vending machine. And the vending machine was 15,000, which is pretty much what we'd earned from these tours. And that's when my daughter, and this is when Are You Smarter Than a 10-year-old, said, if you converted a little horse trailer and put a little shop in the horse trailer, if somebody stole the horse trailer, what's the horse trailer worth with the stock in it? And I said, about, I don't know, probably £800 for a rice trailer. They were cheap then. I mean, they got a bit trendy now,
Yeah.
haven't they?
Yeah.
And all. But I said, I don't know, about £1,000. And they said, so you can have it stolen 15 times, Daddy, and still be cheaper than the vending machine. So we opened the honesty shop of coffee and things like that, and that's how the second business then started up, and that made us have gave us some more income, and then we put the shop into the shed and expanded that. And that's when a chap called Will came up and proposed the idea of Typico Fermentary to me. And yeah, and all of a sudden we're making kefir water.
Yeah, and that business, and people can Google that. That's a hell of a success story, isn't it? Yeah.
Massive. And really interestingly, it was when everyone was getting really triggered by, or farmers were getting really triggered by dairy, and I thought, right, well, let's go the opposite. Let's look at the opposite. So rather than get triggered, let's get excited by the vegans, and what can we supply them? What can't they get? How could this work? And it just so happened, I got talking to this chap called Will, and he said, "Well, I'm looking to set up a business. Have you got anywhere to rent?" I said, "I don't do rents. I don't like the idea of renting. I want to become a partner." And I said, I'll provide you the premises, and I'll sit as a sleeping partner to your business. Um, well, I think he's just had it valued at 3 million.
Wow.
Um, yeah, not bad rental, is it?
No.
Um, so these are the sort of things, and that came on a little bit of the whole pitch up idea of Kingsclear. What's his name? I've even spoken
Tim.
on the
Tim.
him. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and loved his idea of this pitch up idea of come to me with a business idea, and we've gone pretty mad with that on the farm now, and we do everything from ancient grain pasta to milling your own wheat to making air dried hams, making biltong, dehydrating fruit, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and people can come and stay as well.
Yeah, yeah, we've got a glamp site. that's yeah, looking over the beautiful wide valley over the best view, and that's again all about people. So we put two lamp pods and a lorry and various other things, and an outdoor hot tub and an outdoor kitchen and indoor kitchen and everything. But you hire it as a group. We want people to be you know yeah, and we want people to be together and enjoy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we have that. We're what else have we got on the farm? Oh, we've got the education centre we've just finished off, this great big conference centre. That's got accommodation for six students as well to stay in. I'm in the office, my office of the conference centre right now, which is pretty special. And we're taking bookings. Yeah, I think we're fully booked for June and early July, and then I'm off anyway. So yeah, it's quite cool, and we're teaming up with the university to offer modules in regenerative agriculture tied to universities.
Awesome. I think one of the things that, and listeners, I guess will pick up on this is I've told you this before, Ben, but I love speaking to you about this stuff because you're so excited about it. And I find it very refreshing because, and I don't want to get into a big debate about social media influencers, although I could offer some quite strong opinions about the farming social media influencers. But I often think that if you look on social media, you would think it would put a young person off going into farming because they're so negative about
Yeah,
it
yeah.
and you know kind of constantly pleading poverty and complaining about the government policy and all that kind of thing. Whereas when I hear you talk, I just hear positivity and excitement and opportunity and flexibility, and I think that is what young people want to hear. Kind of,
You've got to get out of the rut of blaming supermarkets and blaming the government. I mean,
yeah,
the person that's in control of your business is you,
yeah,
and and one of the massive things that again another trigger apart from the word regen ag, another trigger is diversity. People just hate that word. Oh, I don't want to diversify, and you think, well,
yeah,
where do you draw the line? If you're a cereal farmer and I tell you to go and buy some cows, that's a diversity, correct? In actual fact, if you're a cereal farmer and you're growing a rotation, that's diversification within the rotation. It's quite important, crop rotation. That's diversity. Where does diversity stop? So the solar we've just had installed a couple of months ago on our barn roof, is that diversification or is that just clever and producing my own electricity and my surplus electricity going to split my surplus water that we pump from a well and therefore create hydrogen to power my machinery in my farmhouse? Is that diversification? Is that a problem? Is that something wrong, or is that clever and bright?
mhm,
And looking at the bills that come into the farm are now checks because we're exporting a bit of electricity, and I'm gonna power all my machinery by hydrogen, and isn't life a wonderful thing? So yeah, I really you know, and the shop is that from somebody selling a tray of eggs outside the farm gate to a little honesty shop, is that diversification? Don't know. And that's what I think it is it's the problem is to throw away the barriers, throw away the
yeah,
idea that the government have to support us, throw away the idea that the supermarkets are all at fault. Become closer to the consumer. Farm the general public. It's absolutely amazing that we produce all this food that is a commodity. We buy brands. Everything's branded. And the reason you brand something is to make money because you offer something different. So a brand is something different than the norm. So we buy all these brands, and it could be chemicals, it could be fertilizers, banks, insurers, electricity. They're all branded. Very hard to even compare because standing orders on electricity, the standing charge on electrics are different than everything. They make it so confused on purpose.
yeah,
We take all those brands and we make a commodity. And the first thing we do when we sell that commodity off the farm gate is they build a brand on it. I mean, look at all our milling wheat we sell. I mean, build a brand.
yeah,
You know, Warburton's loaf, Kingsmill, doesn't matter, wherever. There's a brand associated to everything, added value, added value, added value. And for me, it's like rather than keep blaming the people that are adding value, why are we not adding value? We did this horrific calculation here 2 years ago. 800 tons of wheat profit 18 months ago. 800 tons of wheat profit is the same profit as 1 ton of pasta, of our air dried ancient grain pasta. Why are we trying
Yeah.
to grow? Why are we trying to grow more yield? To depress the price even more.
Mm.
I mean, the whole business model's just sat in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And with inflation of everything other than what we're selling, then we've got to change the business model and the way we look at business. And funny enough, when you start selling to the consumer, and you said about this, get on my land. Sorry, we've gone all over the place here. And the reason I do this hashtag get on my land and show the general public, number one, they've given me over £1 million in the last 30 years in taxes and my benefits, as I call them. But, we call them subsidies to make sure that we don't call them benefits.
Yeah.
But we are the biggest benefit takers in the world. And therefore, I think it's only wise that these people that have paid into our benefit system come and see what I've done with their money.
Mm.
I think that's a fair relationship because the other oddity I see is this demand from all social medias: buy British, support British farming. Well, I think that's a two-way thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Support British farming, yes, but come and have a look. Come and have a look at this wonderful countryside. That my bluebell wood, the bits of my farm that are just so beautiful that I'm ashamed to think that they're mine.
Mm.
Share them out. More to the point, I want to go cap in hand to the NHS and say, right, I can help you massively with mental health budget and all that. I can open and throw open my farm to come and listen to skylarks, look at bluebells, all that sort of thing, and want to be part of the natural health service, which should be running along. And this horrible silo of agriculture and DEFRA here, NHS over there, needs to be totally mudded, producing high good food, good food education as well.
Yeah.
Or should be synergies between what is those two government departments. So I want to go and farm the NHS a little bit as well, but I want to farm people. I want to farm people, yeah, and I take them on this on my farm tours, and I walk them around, and then they say, "How do we support you? What do we do?" Well, funny enough, there's an exit through the gift shop if you like, or here's the website of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Fantastic! Another load of new clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they walk away all happy because they've seen that things can be different. I walk into the house and have a little quick look at the bank account, and all of a sudden you see them all spending in the shop. It's awesome. If you're looking for dopamine hits, you don't need to buy brand new tractors to get that. You go and have a look at people spending.
Yeah. You don't need to reach for social media.
No, no. So it's phenomenal when you
Mm.
just take your head away from the furrow, so to speak, and just look up and go, what are we doing all this for, and how can we go about it? I mean, we're just so excited here of everything that's going on and how it all looks. And pop-up restaurant coming at the end of the month, and then we're actually building a restaurant. We got planning for, a zero menu restaurant where, to avoid food waste. We've got too much choice. If there's choice, there's waste.
Yeah.
So we want to teach people about seasonality. We want to teach people about everything about how we do things on the farm and why you're eating what you're eating tonight. Probably not suitable for vegans, if I'm honest, because you have no choice. So if we happen to have killed a pig or
Mm.
a lamb or whatever, it
Mm.
will be served. So, but we think there's a future to dining like that.
It's exciting. Me and Sarah will come down when you've got that
Yeah,
up and running. Um, you've talked a lot about the walks and you've painted a real picture about how the farm looks naturally, but you also have man-made artwork on the farm, and that really saying that just doesn't do it justice. So tell us a bit about the mural and some of the sculptures because they are mind-blowingly good.
yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a kickback. I actually don't believe that biology is a science, and that often upsets a few. But I do think the three sciences as chemistry, physics, math. and they're the three sciences because they're binary. And for science to be real science, they need to be repeatable experiments, however, whatever, and theories. The beautiful thing of biology is the word mutation, and
Mm.
that wonderful thing that is mutation means that nothing can be repeated exactly the same. Hence the reason we've got resistance to antibiotics, resistance to weed killers, and resistance to all sorts of things. So I often think biology is much more like an art, much more like the hand of an artist's brush. Just slightly changing, slightly. You can all draw the same thing, and it'll all look slightly different. That is mutation, isn't it? I'm desperate to offer the very first Bachelor of Arts in agriculture here in this learning centre. I want people to get into poetry. I write a lot of poetry, as you know. I can't draw for toffee, but I love photography. I think most farmers should spend more time listening to their gut feeling rather than actually being persuaded by their brain. Your second brain, your stomach, is a very good thing, and that again is associated with the arts. So I'm massively into arts and that sort of thing. But yeah, I obviously we've started making some good cash on the farm. And there's two ways of spending that cash, isn't there? You can either buy some beautiful paintings and hang them up in your house and only you see them, or you can become slightly less selfish and paint them on the side of a building, or create a sculpture or have a sculpture created and put it on the farm that you see every day, like you would if it was in your house. But thousands and thousands of other people can appreciate it too. So we had Ollie Gillard come and start our mural. It's great big. It's what is it, 22 meters wide by 16 meters high on the end of a shed. And my mum called it New Horizons. And essentially, the centre of it is how we were farming. Lots of erosion, polluted river, too many sheep overgrazing, all that sort of thing, how we were. And then all round both sides of it, so that's a triangle in the middle, and then both sides of it show how we're aspiring to farm and what we're trying to do and either are doing or on the journey to achieving. So that was the first bit. And the reaction we had from people coming was just phenomenal. And that set the wheels in motion for the hedgehogs. Brosson used to be the land of the urchins. That's what hedgehogs used to be called, hence sea urchin was named after hedgehogs. And So we've got this wonderful sculpture of this huge mummy hedgehog pulling a cart with three little rebel hedgehogs in the back, all holding
Yeah.
signs. And then we've got dung beetles being made, and there's and a salmon and various things all out of scrap metal as well. So these artists that we get are taking essentially what we would put in a skip and creating art out of them. And the little company called Coco is called No Time to Waste, and I love that idea that she'll just go around the farm and collect stuff up and create these amazing, some of them very simple, but just breathtaking sculptures. And we've put them all around the new walks of the farm and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah,
They are incredible. I think anyone who comes to your place, the mural's such a you're kind of drawn to it as a magnet, aren't you? It's just, I
yeah,
mean, I love street art anyway, but it's just the scale of it, I think, is just
yeah,
blows your mind. Yeah.
yeah. Really cool.
You mentioned earlier, I think you said you're off for June. But just to put listeners in the picture, you're not on holiday. You advise a lot of people all around the
Yeah,
world.
yeah.
So tell us about some of the kind of people and organizations you advise.
Um, I have the most wonderful tapestry of people I advise all across the UK and of course across Europe and then the wider world as well. Most of it all by word of mouth or just Googling me and asking me. So my smallest client I go and see is 40 hectares. And it's rather quite a sad story, but being totally ripped off, and I didn't like it. So I go and see her and do the absolute opposite to show that there is no reason to be ripped off. I've got quite a lot of lady clients, and I love because they're so different than all my male clients. If you know what I mean. I mean, women are from Venus and men are from Mars. It's amazing, but they're absolutely fantastic in their how they farm and their thought process is so much different than most. It's great.
Maybe a bit of lack of male ego maybe helps a little bit, does it?
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. They're very much more sociable farmers in so
Mm,
much as they're very much more. Oh yeah, get on my land. Yeah, I can see that's a good idea.
mm.
You talk to a lot of men and they're like, bloody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, interesting conversations, and then yes, and then I work. I've got some wonderful clients in Estonia over there, and been with them many years now, and how just just winding them up a little bit about again they're big cereal farmers and the diversification thing of they've got some horrific looking buildings built by the Russians the USSR back in the day,
Mm.
but they are enormous and could house some sheep in the winter and then they could go out and graze and that sort of thing. So the flock of sheep has arrived and they're all quite excited to get onto that bandwagon and that sort of thing. And then down through Europe, various things. I often get told that I just challenge people's thinking, and
Yeah,
they like being left in a bit of a uncomfortable position when I leave. In so much as perhaps we should actually, because unless somebody says, "Well, why aren't you doing it?" They
yeah,
almost they almost don't know why they're not doing it.
yeah. Yeah, I can totally get that because I mentioned it earlier, but you and we worked together for 3 years on the Borley Oxford Farming Conference, and so I've obviously been in a lot of meetings with you, and we were a very diverse board and group of people anyway. But you were so good at sometimes you would just say, "Why are we doing this?" or "Why aren't we doing this?" and everybody would look at each other and go, "Why aren't we doing that?" And it was just
Yeah,
something that you hadn't. I don't know.
yeah,
I guess, yeah, I guess that's the
yeah.
advantage of having a diverse group of people and different thinkers, isn't it?
I do love that program. Are you smarter than a 10-year-old? And I do
Yeah,
think so often I go back to the what and the whys.
yeah.
Why are we doing this? And there's a wonderful bit of graffiti on a wall as you go down the M40 towards London. And this graffiti just reads, "Why do we do this every day?"
I like
And
that.
as you sat in the traffic jam, and you read it, and you just think there are people. Obviously, I don't, but there must be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people read that sign every day, and
Really good.
I think it's fantastic. But yeah, and it certainly is different. And then my favourite place is Africa to work. I absolutely love it out there, I'm off to Zambia for July after groundswell, and to work there and play a bit. To be fair, because what I love about them there is they work hard, but very much respect weekends, very much respect evenings even,
Mm,
unlike us as farmers that seem to be just getting busier and busier and busier. I'm more than happy to work, 15, 18 hours a day and all weekends too. So I love it out there for a bit of respite. But I also love it out there for the challenge because it's the opposite of here. So you've got to understand, say, a 14,000 hectare estate employs 14,000 people because
yeah.
they're very grateful of the job they have and the role they have. So I just give a quick example. I went out there, and the first time I went out there, I asked for a spade and I dug a hole, and there was a whole commotion went on. Um, and I'd taken somebody's job, and it was their job to dig the hole and show me what was in the hole. That's more than happy, but it wasn't your job to dig the hole, sort of thing. So the whole thing's amazing. So we went down and talked about growing these cover crops on 4,500 hectares. Um, And I was like, and you could do with crimping it, to desiccate it. Well, they all went in with the scythes and literally on 4,500 hectares laid all this sun hemp down and protected the soil surface, and it's just amazing to see it all in action. But so grateful and so happy and so inquisitive about the whole thing. It's a big story. The big things out there, water usage and energy usage. There isn't a lot of either. So we've got to make sure that the plants are respiring and not losing moisture and that sort of thing. And it makes a huge difference to the bottom line, as well as the amount of fertilizer. Reducing that and using the right types of fertilizer in the right scenario to get the equivalent yield. But with half the water and half the energy, it's massive savings to be had.
Yeah. Yeah. You've also worked with some very high profile people, some royals and people,
Yeah,
it's kind of I sometimes think I don't know, your diary must be and your phone book must be kind of a bit of a head kicker.
yeah. I try not to talk too much about it because I actually, yeah, I'm not one to boast about who I look after. I don't, as you've probably just seen, I didn't mention any of the names of
No.
anybody else because I actually respect everybody's privacy to a point, and therefore, yeah, and leave it at that. But I do work with some amazing people, and heads of state in various places as well, and all that sort of thing. And I still turn up in my shorts and t-shirt and a pair of trainers and that sort of thing. And yeah, and I explain that I my ADHD and I really and as I we went through at the Oxford Farming Conference, and I really clam up and struggle to even have brain thought when I have trousers on my legs. It's just a thing I wear them at funerals, although now most people say, "Why are you wearing those?" They wouldn't like you in those
Yeah.
because that's how they know you. So it's yeah, it's getting to the point where you take me for what I know. Steve Jobs was a bit different in so much as, but he was never the CEO that was in shirt and tie doing
Mm.
presentations, and he sort of reading his book a while ago. And he said, just be comfortable with who you are and what you are and how you are because it's you. People will see you, need to see you rather than see your clothes.
Mm. Absolutely. Just quickly, whether it's someone, whether it's a normal farmer like me, or whether it's a big organization or a state or something, when someone gets in touch with you, um, is there a kind of common thread? I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm guessing that most of those people know what they want to get to, but they don't know how to get there, and that's why they need your help. Is
Yeah,
that
I
kind of
mean, I
right?
mean, yes, it's a combination of a lot of things. It's quite interesting. I normally get called in when they've gone and bought a direct drill off and then can't get it to work, and they forgot
Yeah.
they forgot to mention to the soil or prepare the soil that you were going to go from all out till to no till, and just thought the whole thing was going to slot in and work. That's
Mm.
often one of the things. It's like, well, you missed step 1 to 19 before you went
Mm.
and did step 20. And it's quite horrific when you tell somebody to park the drill back in the shed and leave it there for a while we just get everything else right because we're nowhere near ready. Because the solution has always been a checkbook, hasn't it, so to speak, in whatever sense. Um, yeah, so that's a lot of it. A lot of people obviously trying to reduce inputs and how do they do it, and a lot of people sadly, I mean, and I'm the opposite as a person, but are always in a rush, and they've read the book, and now they look out the farm window and want it all happening today. A farming year is 365 days, and it often takes between 5 and 8 years to get anything working back and all of that sort of thing. And the rushes that people are in to get there into this utopia is frightening. So a lot of the time it's like you're not ready. You're not ready. There's nothing new. There is loads new, but I'm not going to tell you there's loads new because in actual fact you'll jump to that before you finish doing this bit first. So it's almost a calming down of people because they get very enthused, but it's trying to keep them enthused as well as on the journey because nature and biology and soil will not go at the speed that your brain is.
Mm. Yeah. Okay.
And then often I'll turn up on an arable farm, and they'll be like, right, first and foremost, there's no livestock. And I say, okay, no problem. Well, let's look after your underground livestock first, and get that living. And then within 3 to 5 years, there's livestock on the farm because they've realized part of the journey they needed to be part of that. So, yeah, I kind of yeah. It's
Speaking of slowing down, we've established that you are kind of 100 mile an hour, but do you ever get chance to stop and think about the whirlwind that's been your life over the last decade? Do you ever, I don't know, do you ever get sort of an hour just to sit and think about that, or are you
Do
too
you know
busy?
what? No, do you know what? We do have me and Helen, well, and the kids. We always have a Sunday roast, less so in the summer, but always in the autumn. No matter how busy we've been out on the farm on the Sunday, we'll always come in and eat a Sunday roast, and that's a massive part of the week. Massive part of the week for us is Sunday dinner, and everybody sort of make sure they're home for Sunday dinner around the table, and that's lovely. Um, Also, me and Helen have massive opportunities. So if I get a cancellation or something, I'm going to be on farm until this time. We'll go often have breakfast dates. There's a little cafe in Ross that we love called Yummy Scrummy or something, and I'll be like, I'm gonna leave till 9:30, and at like 9 o'clock we're down, and they know us down there, sort of thing. And we have these lovely little chats over breakfast and that sort of thing. So again, yeah, very busy, but we do make time for each other, and we do have a lot of fun when we're doing stuff as well.
Yeah.
Except moving animals. I mean, obviously, moving animals, you scream and bellow at each other. I mean, that's the rule.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. I mean, Helen is the most calm person until I do something like shouldn't moving an animal, and the red mist descends, and I'm like, where's all this come from?
Yeah,
So yeah, moving animals is yeah. So now they move animals without me,
yeah, okay.
and I bought her a sheepdog. So we've got Tom the collie, who Helen is works like she should be on one man and his dog kind of thing. I videoed her the one time we had to do it together, and she said, "You just stand up by this gate and do nothing." And I was actually quite emotional watching her work Tom and the sheep, and it was wow, that is fantastic. So
Awesome. Let's just briefly get on to some future plans. You're writing a book.
yeah, so
When are we gonna see the book, man?
it yeah, so as you know, I'm writing it with Jane Craigie, who is probably as busy as I am. I
Yeah,
mean, and in Scotland, so
yeah.
obviously that works well. Meeting up and getting things written. It's and then there's me. So the book was going to be really. I came up with this idea of calling it Moron, MORE hyphen ON, the British addiction to adding more and more inputs. And then I sort of skeletoned it all out and that sort of thing. And then I thought there needs to be a book after this of this moron of all the solutions. And then I thought less on all the lessons I learned. LESS less on. And then I thought, why don't I do a book that reads more on one way, and then you flip it over and it's less on reads the other way. So that's where we are. So the most ADHD book you could ever
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
ever get to read, and it will be written, and yeah, I mean, we're we're over the hump of all the projects on the farm. I'm 15, July the 18th next year, and the girls are taking the reins of the farm on my birthday, and picking up and running an awful lot more of that kind of thing, and letting Helen have some time off. They've got two wonderful boyfriends. In actual fact, I never thought I'd say that. Um, both called Jack, and yeah, and both into farming and all that sort of thing. And yeah, it's going to be awesome, and give me and Helen a bit more time to do what we want to do and that sort of thing. So and write the book. It's got to be. And the trouble is, every time I write a chapter, then I do something else on the farm and think, oh,
Yeah. It's yeah, it's a bit of a never-ending story with you,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
So but we are nearing the end of what I call Project Townsend, building the empire,
Nice.
which is pretty cool. The restaurant is the very last thing.
Yeah.
So yeah,
You took the girls, and I've obviously met your girls. They're just like you and Helen. They're high energy and go-getters and charging on. And I've no doubt they'll take the farming to the next level again. But will you will you find it hard to step back, or a bit of both maybe? Or
no, no, I won't, because I've got plenty of other things to.
yeah,
I've got so much. I want to go fishing again, like I used to as a boy, and enjoy the
yeah,
river for what the river can provide for me, rather than me trying to keep it clean from phosphates and that sort of thing. I want to spend more time taking Helen to these breakfast meetings, breakfast dates sort of thing, and yeah, but perhaps potter in the garden and that sort of thing. And everyone says, oh, you won't be able to. I've got to be busy. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
I don't necessarily need to be busy building the empire. And I'm desperate. I'm desperate for the girls to have the opportunity, rather than a father breathing down their neck and tell them they've got everything wrong. Of course, I'll be the sounding board. Come to me with the ideas, and I'm happy to give you my opinion and that sort of thing.
yeah,
But I really, the world's too small for lots of people having too many opinions. Nothing gets done.
yeah, yeah. That happens a lot in farming families, doesn't it? And it never really works.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
So
right. Okay.
yeah,
Um, let's round this off with the traditional hard-hitting questions.
yeah.
What's the best gig you've ever been to? Music, comedy?
It's a really interesting question, and it's not the simplest of answers. Growing up, I went to everything from Michael Jackson to Queen to Prince to Simply Red to U2, you name it. I went to every gig, and do you know what? I don't think I appreciated any of them, and I didn't live them for what they probably were, and looking back in hindsight, should have been. I'm going to be quite probably soft in my reply. The best gig I've ever been to was Groundswell last year. Okay, Andy Cato played a set, and my daughter the day before had her prom, and sadly was bullied at her prom.
Oh,
It was quite an horrific time. I was at Groundswell at the time, and I was
right.
getting these phone calls and stuff, and things were not not great at all. And Erin's a lovely girl as well, and
Yeah.
and it was just nasty. And I happened to be speaking to Andy the following day, and he said, "You look you don't look like your normal self." I said, "Oh, I've got." And in the end, I said, "Oh, I've got me Erin, and I had a hard time. She's on her way down with Helen and Job." And he said, "We can put that right." I was like, "What?" He's like, "I'll get her up on the decks with me." And I think I wept the whole evening with her up on the decks, having the best time.
Yeah.
TikToking and doing everything. And I thought, what other farming community on earth, right, could turn something like that into something like that in such a short space of time with music? So yeah, that's I'm going to start weeping again. I mean, this is just
I was there. I didn't realize she was up there.
yeah,
I didn't realize Erin was up
yeah,
there, but yeah.
yeah. She was up there with him, and yeah, it was just amazing. So that for so many reasons.
Yeah. Okay. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Probably from a bank manager called Dick Mason.
Okay.
And I'm awful at remembering names as well. So this bank manager obviously stuck in my head for a bit. Um, he always used to say the phrase, or one of the cherries tomorrow.
Okay.
He said, everyone's building a cake, and everyone's icing the cake, and everybody's looking for the cherries to go on top of the cake. And you spend your life looking for cherries to go on it because nothing's ever finished.
Mm,
I'm nearly there. I should be able to pay off the overdraft. I should be able to do that. I'm nearly there. I've finished that. And he always said, everybody promises cherries tomorrow, but what you need to do is actually have the cherries today and build the cake and appreciate what you have today, and don't keep spending the whole life about what is how it's all going to look tomorrow, because it'll all be perfect, because you'll never get there. And that changed an awful lot in my life about appreciating everything I got. I go out on my farm every morning, even if I'm leaving at 4 a.m., I'll have a look round and I'll smile from ear to ear. I love what we've created, I love what we are, and I love what we am. And so yeah, Cherries Tomorrow, I think, is one of those things that I've got it on my office wall, in actual fact, and it just reminds me that, yeah, don't just spend the whole time looking for the icing on, or the cherries on the top of the icing.
Really cool. Love that. Okay, what's I'm going to ask you this. You've probably read more books than anyone I know, but what's the best book you've ever read? Or maybe the one that's had the most impact on you at a particular time.
Yeah, like you said, I've read thousands of books. It's a choice of two. One is to do with food, and one isn't. Uh, let's go for the one that isn't. There's a book called Scale. Emily Norton, funny enough, told me to read this. She said, right up your street and you'll love it. And oh my goodness, and I've told everybody to read it since. And it's a chap called Geoffrey West has written it. He's a physicist, but he looked at biological processes and linked how animals, ecosystems, business, and humans are all related, and how they all relate to one another. Right? It's really hard to describe the book, but I would suggest you read it. It is astonishing in every page of fact, and like we talked about that challenge to your preconceived ideas of this and that sort of thing. And he just smashes through them all, and links, is there a maximum size of a city? Is that related to the size of a business, and is that related to the size of an ecosystem and things like that? It's absolutely amazing. And the people I've told to read it just ring me up and say, "My goodness, what a read!"
I'm going to order
So
that
yeah,
today.
yeah,
I will 100% read that.
yeah.
Okay. If you could meet any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Um, Darwin.
I thought you might say that.
And do you know why? Nothing to do with the origin of species. His work is two what I the two most fascinating works that he's done that I've read is the anatomy of the earthworm. It's actually called the production of vegetable leaf mold through the action of earthworms, if you really want to know the title. And it is just the most amazing research he did on earthworms, whether and stuff he did, and he buried up very famously a millstone using just worms to actually bury a millstone. And I tell people that have got lots of stone on their fields, if you actually just leave it and let the earthworms, they'll bury them all. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, and then he also did all the studies on bicropping ryegrass with clovers, and worked out that if you had 100% ryegrass and 100% clover as yields, but then combine the two, you get 120 odd percent of the yield by growing the two things in synergistic. And I just love to chat with him all through all of, I think he had a massive influence on farming, and I think there's a lot of learnings there that we probably should have picked up on.
I would like to be a fly on the wall if you and Darwin had a conversation. I'd like to just be sitting in the background earwigging. Okay. And last but not least, then, what is your all-time favorite song?
Okay, this is going to be as odd a song as you've ever had. I should have thought on this podcast, but it means so much to the Taylor Davies clan, and as much to me. So we have our Sunday dinners every Sunday, and then every Sunday we have a sing song. And it's really important. We get whatever music, the kids will play all what theirs, and we'll have a proper sing song around the table. And more often than not, we've got guests as well, and they have to join in. It's the law, yeah, as you can imagine, it's you've had your dinner now you have to have a sing and and all that sort of thing. And then during the evening, do re mi from The Sound of Music.
Okay.
Okay, and the reason why this is so important is Job is obviously sat around the kitchen table, knows the words to do re mi, and each person has to sing a different thing. Obviously, do a deer, female
Yeah.
deer, goes around the table, and our guests are. You can just see the blind panic set in their faces. It's going starting to go around the table. Because and we have Darren, our lorry mechanic. Well, he's not a lorry mechanic at all. He's a mechanic that comes in. He comes up on once a month. He comes up on a Friday, stays Saturday, Sunday, and we get everything, all projects built or repairs done, and that sort of thing. And he spends the whole Friday day before he comes up to us on the Friday evening learning the words, and he now knows the whole words to "Oh dear," and yeah, and it's such. I don't know. It's one of those things that's become a little bit infamous
Mm.
tradition sort of thing, and yeah, and somebody will start it off, and all the actions and everything as well. It's great, and like I said, because Job is so obviously because he's quite sensory responsive, so loves music as well. So and it's just lovely that the whole family just get into it, and it doesn't matter boyfriends and whoever sat around the table, all got to be part of that Doa Deer. So that's my favourite song, and that's the reason why.
Awesome. What a brilliant reason. Love it. Ben, it's been great to speak to you as always. And
Yeah,
hopefully we'll catch up soon. We should have done this years ago, but yeah, it's better late than never.
yeah, it's been brilliant. Really
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I will yeah, we'll no doubt see you at Groundswell for a beer.
You will do. I'll see you there.
Love to the family and
I
to
will.
everybody at home. Thanks for listening and hope to see you next time. I've been Will Evans. This has been Rock and Roll Farming. Thank you and good night.